Even in the blowouts, we're still grinding the tape, and it was another week where Jake Browning left opportunities on the field, but maybe there are signs of life on defense. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jake Liscow. He is Mike Santagata joining me today as we get through our weekly film review that would have been a whole lot more fun if week 2 had never happened. You can find Mike on Twitter at Bengals_Sands, or maybe he'll be grinding those coaches clinics. Mike, have you started the coaches clinic of the week yet? Have you started posting that as we've joked about for the last few weeks on these episodes?
No, but I probably should. It's more exciting. It's more exciting than what we're watching on the field.
Got to get on that. We got to do our part here to spread the coaches clinic loves, and that's why we're doing our weekly film analysis, film takeaways that continues to suggest the Bengals should strongly consider a move at quarterback the way that Jake Browning is playing. But this week against a really good offense in the Detroit Lions that, yeah, they eventually end up putting 36 plus on the board. If you take away the turnovers and the safety, the Bengals defense only gives up 21 points to the Detroit Lions, who have been over 30, well, now for 4 straight weeks in terms of total points. But we're going to start today with Jake Browning because Jake Browning is playing the most important position in sports, quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, and wasn't good enough. Welcome back, by the way, to all of you who make Locked On Bengals part of your everyday routine, and all of you who make Locked On Bengals your first listen. Mike, let's dive into another week of disappointing Jake Browning film where before we started recording, I described his pocket presence as schizophrenic, not really knowing what to do, where his eyes should be, when they should be there, breaking down at the first sign of something going wrong in terms of posture, the processing really not there, the ball often coming out late, the ball often coming out woefully inaccurately. But it's another week where, to me, when I look at the design of the offense and what they're trying to do, especially in the passing game this week, where the passing game was much bigger emphasis against the Lions than it had been in the previous couple of weeks, there are guys open. It looks like there are opportunities there, and Jake Browning just isn't finding them or isn't delivering the ball on time and accurately.
Yeah, he's right now late on a lot of stuff. He's never early. So the timing isn't that he's hitting his check down before things have a chance to develop. It feels like he's a guy that needs to see it open to throw it, at least at the moment. And the inaccuracy and being late leads to interceptions, which is what we saw. When you don't have some type of rocket Josh Allen type of arm where you could be late and still fit it in there, or be a little inaccurate and nobody could catch it. These are, well, for better or worse, for both defense and offense, Jake Browning throws a catchable ball because it's pretty soft. He saw it on the second pick, hangs up there. The second pick, that guy could have called a fair catch. Late and underthrown. Two of the picks, there were 2 guys that were in position to catch the ball, and they were not Bengals. So it's tough. You put yourself down in such a big hole from those 3 turnovers that, yeah, he kind of strings some stuff together in that second half and that fourth quarter especially. But at that point, I mean, the game's essentially over. You're playing against the Lions. You're down 3 scores. You're putting up some points, and make it look a little respectable. Give the fans something to watch. But when the game mattered, he was late. He was inaccurate. The ball wasn't getting to the right spot. He was misreading things. And like you said, the schizophrenic in the pocket. Yeah, he's even seeing people back there when they're not back there too. So it's a good description. He's running away from nobody's. It's tough to watch, and you see it. Like, they've scored 3 points in the first half in all 3 of their last 3 games, the games Jake Browning starts. That you don't win NFL games scoring 3.5.
It's really shocking to me that they didn't actually make a move at quarterback this week. Not that I think Brett Rippon is going to be better per se, but the way Browning was playing, the way he was processing, the way he left the ball inside or short or whatever it was often, and not even on just interceptions, even on the one of the early plays of the game. I like some of their design early in the game. Some of the naked bootleg stuff they were doing early in this game was getting guys open. The play action game was affecting the linebackers because of the way they were running it this week, at least, again, early in the game. Think of the Jamar Chase catch early in the game in space, picks up a first down. And then think of the throw to T. Higgins, very similar concept. This time, Aiden Hutchinson bearing down. So a little bit of pressure, but you're going to have that on naked bootlegs. There's time for Browning to get the ball off. There's time for him to lead T toward the sideline so he can make an easy catch for, 15 yards or so. But instead, ball behind. T tries to high point it. And good play from the Lions defensive back to get a hand between T's hands and break it up as T's going to the ground. But that's just another example of a play that doesn't necessarily lead to an interception, but it's just, man, if the accuracy is a little bit better, if the timing's a little bit better, if there's any anticipation to Jake Browning's game, when you're saying he has to see the guy open, to me, one of the big criticisms with Browning watching live this week, on film review this week, watching last week, is there's just no anticipation to his game. There are a number of plays where he hits his back foot, and if he can throw with anticipation, he's going to have a guy open in the window that is designed for the guy to be open in. But instead, it's not exactly perfect. It's not exactly how he wants it to look. So he kind of comes off that play or breaks down in the pocket, becomes a runner, drops his eyes, drops his posture. And when you have that combined with some of the predetermined reads, which is still a problem in this game, you get a totally ineffective passing game.
And you mentioned that play to T later on in the broadcast point this went out too. I mean, the Lions run what looked like some version of cover two, and T is on the safety, and the safety is outside. And if Jake Browning, all the room in the world, if you think about what cover two would be, one safety on the other side of the field, nobody else is deep over there. It's T one-on-one with this guy, and Jake Browning throws it towards the defensive back's leverage instead of away from the leverage, giving T a chance to make the play.
Yeah.
It's like T didn't come down with it. But those aren't the thing about 50-50 balls isn't like every ball that's in the air is a true 50-50. Can the quarterback put it at the right leverage? Can he hit it at the right time where they have a chance? You see this all the time on those back shoulder fades. That back shoulder fade works so well because the defensive back's on top of them. If the defensive back's under, you got to throw it over the top. And I think Browning's misreading some leverage quite a bit because on that fourth down that the Bengals kind of got bailed out a little bit by a DPI call, they run a play called Raven, and that's a pick and a wheel route, basically a rail route from the number two. Number two here is Gesicki, and the defensive back goes underneath of it. So throw it over the top. Throw it over the top and give him space to run. This could have been an explosive. And instead, Browning threw it behind him. And if the DB was in phase, like he could have made a play on that ball. But instead, he's chasing Gesicki and ends up not making any play on the ball, head facing the wrong way. But
and a weird DPI call. That was a play where also there was pre-snap communication where Jake Browning's trying to communicate something to Gesicki. Gesicki kind of shrugs back at him like, what? And then they look like they're miscommunicating when the ball goes to Gesicki on that play.
But it looks to me, at least from the play, like it looks like Gesicki ran the right route. It looks like Browning made the mistake, if anybody did.
Right, maybe because Browning's trying to tell Gesicki, like, hey, this is what, like, same route, but we're going to approach it different. That was my thought. Like, maybe this is me telling you I'm going to go back shoulder here, and Gesicki's like, what?
At one point, Browning also, he points at his own helmet and calls a quarterback draw, and it goes for 3 yards. I thought that was a funny communication moment.
Let's stay on this offense, Mike. The offensive line, I think, is going to be a hot topic again this week. It wasn't so great in the second half, but I thought they were adequate, at least early on. And this is dealing with a couple really good end pass rushers for the Detroit Lions. So we'll discuss a little bit more on this offense before we transition and talk about the defense, where it wasn't perfect. And I have serious qualms with the way they came out on the first drive, 2 drives of the game or so. But there are reasons to feel like there were some signs of progress. And it's a really good offense, like I said, for the Lions. So we will eventually get to some positives, some nitpicks as well on the defensive side of the ball, some adjustments we would like to see them make a little bit faster, but some signs of life from that defense. We'll get to that topic after we finish the offense coming up next. We're brought to you today here on Locked On Bengals by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right and it's daily fantasy done right. It's such a fun and simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections, like maybe less on the Jake Browning passing yards, more on Josh Allen's passing yards, or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown. And just like that, you're in the game. You can make your lineups in under a minute. It's quick, it's easy. They just added stacks on PrizePicks. So if you want to go with a player, you can select their passing yards, rushing yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. And they've got a reboot feature. So if your player leaves early and doesn't return with an injury, won't even count against you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL. You get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Mike, let's stay on the offense here a little bit. A game where they didn't emphasize the run game. So we're not going to sit here and harp on the run game this week, although it was very interesting that Samaje Perine ended up in roughly a 50-50 split with Chase Brown in this game, especially with the way they're passing the ball. Samaje Perine, I think, a guy they trust a little bit more in that third down back, pass protecting back role, even though I think Chase Brown was really good at it last year and took strides in that area. Samaje also maybe a little bit more effective as a runner in this particular game, but the run blocking, I think, still leaves a lot to be desired in general. I don't think we're going to talk much about that this week. It really wasn't a point of emphasis, like I said. But I thought that early on, the pass protection was adequate. There are a number of opportunities, like I said, where Jake Browning hits his back foot. He's got a pocket. If he can throw with anticipation or even just throw on time, the concepts that they're calling in the passing game seem to have guys open when they should be open, where they should be open. What did you think of the pass pro on rewatch? I know there are a lot of people picking on, Orlando Brown for the flea flicker sack or Dylan Fairchild for the safety, neither of which were good plays. But outside of that, there's a whole game to talk about. What were your thoughts on the offensive line?
I was pretty encouraged by that first half when they were able to play in a true mix down approach. First down could be run or pass. Versus the second half, it's all passing. I mean, they've run it once in a while, but at that point, Detroit's selling out to stop the pass. I thought Detroit actually, surprisingly, through the first 4 weeks, they were kind of a defense that wanted to stop the run and force third and longs. And against the Bengals, they kind of took the approach of, we're going to try to slow down this passing attack and keep safeties back versus trying to put a safety into the fit and force them to beat them over the top. So they kind of played the offense, not the quarterback. And I was pretty encouraged by the first half. I think it was good pass protection. I wouldn't even just say adequate. I thought that was pretty good. There are moments, of course, but you're facing Aiden Hutchinson, which is a really good rusher. And maybe I'm just Stockholm syndrome from watching this particular team, but this is one of their better pass. I think if Joe Burrow is back there, I don't know if people would have the same complaints about the offensive line. Because the ball would be out, and if he did extend the play, he would extend, hopefully, at least to the right way, or would get the ball out, or would do things to protect this offensive line as well. But considering the situation, the opponent, I thought it was pretty good pass protection. I thought they handled stunts. That was impressive on the island, the 2-man island that Paul Alexander in one of his clinics calls the Gilligan. There's your clinic drop. The Gilligan, when the center slides the opposite way and you're 2-on-2 and they're running a stunt, you have no help. Jalen Rivers and Amarius Mims passed that stunt multiple times. And I could think just last week, they weren't doing that. I think I was on here saying the communication wasn't very good between those two. This week it was. So I was a little bit impressed by this offensive line early.
And it wasn't so good late. You go look at PFF right now as you're listening to this. You're probably already seen PFF grades as you're listening to this. If you're a hardcore Bengals fan who's here for the Monday film takes from a third straight blowout loss, respect to you checking us out here today. But you look at that, you see, they gave up 20 pressures. All of them were the offensive line. Dylan Fairchild gave up 5 pressures. Zach Karras gave up 3 pressures from center. Orlando Brown gave up 6 pressures and a sack. Obviously, I talked about the Dylan Fairchild safety as well. Jalen Rivers gave up 4 pressures. Amari Sims only gave up 2. But he had a clean loss against an Aiden Hutchinson spin move negated by a neutral zone infraction by Aiden Hutchinson. So Uh, if you want to be nitpicky, if you want to look at it through a negative lens, you can certainly find all those things. But as I was watching the box score live in this game, Jake Browning ends up pressured, according to PFF, on 40% of his dropbacks. That number was much, much lower in the first half. And it did devolve when they became a no mix downs, we're dropping back 100% of the time, blah, blah, blah. But it was, like you said, whether it's adequate or good, whatever your perception is of how this offensive line played early, it gave them a chance on offense. And I think the most frustrating thing about it is if Joe Burrow's playing in this game, I think they cut the Lions up. The Lions probably have a different approach. They probably go for a lot of those fourth downs that they punt on. They probably have an entirely different game plan to deal with Joe Burrow versus Jake Browning. But I think the way the offensive line played, the way they called the game, the way that there were guys getting open against the suspect secondary, Joe Burrow sees it, plays with anticipation, plays with accuracy, plays with timing, plays with processing. And obviously there's a gulf between Burrow and Browning, but Browning just not even close, not close to good enough in this game. The defense gave them chances though early, Mike. They were frustrating to start the game. Even on the drive where Trey Hendrickson eventually gets a strip sack, I was still very frustrated as I was rewatching that one on tape in terms of the way they're calling it early. So let's get this out of the way. We'll finish the show on a positive note. We'll finish the show with the good things from the defense. But man, I know everyone's talking about it this week. Maybe because it was more blatant early, maybe because they're not coming on replacement pressures, maybe because they're putting 5 defensive linemen on the field. But the approach at the start of this game, as I pointed out on social media, I think we talked about it on yesterday's show as well, was they started the game with 5 defensive linemen. They're answering Detroit's 12 personnel by putting an extra defensive tackle on the field, Oren Burks on the field at linebacker. They had an interesting rotation at linebacker in this game. Logan Wilson played one of his worst games, I think, as a Bengal, especially early when the game was in the balance, missing tackles. I don't want to see him manned up on an athletic, good receiving tight end. That's a tough ask for Logan, but the tackling issues in the run game, tackling issues on the perimeter. But a lot of it was Joseph Osai dropping into coverage, Cam Sample dropping into coverage, and the Lions finding it every time the Bengals dropped an end into coverage.
Yeah, and that's the how you're playing when you have 5 defensive linemen. Most coverages, cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, whatever, they're going to have 7 defenders in coverage. You only have so many resources. You've got 5 defensive linemen to stop the run, 2 linebackers, 4 defensive backs. Okay. You have 6 guys that are used to playing coverage. You have to figure out who that 7th one is going to be. And I would personally hope that you don't make it the guy off the Achilles tear in Cam Sample. Like, I just feel bad for him anytime they drop him specifically. But on the other side, it's also they're dropping Joseph Osai and he's covering Sam Laporta. So it's not like it's really better when you get the more athletic guy doing it. They don't really have the horses to be trying to do that. And they didn't really with Lou either. He liked to run these 5 defensive line fronts because they're both, on one hand, they want the big defensive end for their nickel so that they get a guy that can reduce down and take on double teams and defend the run. But on the other hand, they also want to drop that guy in coverage. Now, there's a very small group of athletes that would be pretty good in coverage and also be 270 pounds as a defensive end. So the overlap isn't really working out for what they want to do on the first couple drives. And I think that's why they also stopped doing it after the first couple of drives. They moved back into the 4-down world and they just reduced a guy down when they got 12, like a wing look. But yeah, early they tried to change that and they got picked on.
They also had a great matchup with the Lions left tackle. Taylor Decker didn't play. Giovanni Manu out there at left tackle in the game. And the Lions, to their credit, did what they could to dictate, on film, Trey Hendrickson is not reducing. He's not playing to the strong side of the offensive formation. So by putting the strong side of the formation on the backup left tackle side, they're getting Trey in the matchup with Penei Sewell, who is really good in this game, I thought. And so you end up with Trey going against your strength in pass protection. You have a lot of help for your left tackle, who's not very good. David Montgomery was generally awesome in pass protection in this game for the Lions as well. So despite the early drive issues and despite the overall points allowed, 14 points that had drives starting at the 17 and 28-yard line for the Lions, didn't have very far to go. 2 points on the safety. Only 21 points allowed by this defense against a really good offense, like I said. And maybe a lot of this is Dan Campbell punting on some fourth downs where normally he wouldn't punt. But there's a lot of potential positives, and maybe we're grasping here, but glimmers of hope, signs of progress, whatever you want to call it, on this defensive side of the ball. We'll finish the show on a high note on this defense coming up next. Today we're brought to you by Mazda here on Locked On Bengals, and those of you who have been watching this show for the last few weeks know that I, in fact, drive a Mazda car. I like to hold up my Mazda keys because it's one of our sponsors, as Matthew McConaughey once said. I've been driving a Mazda before I was paid to drive a Mazda, and I'm not paid to drive a Mazda, but Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move, delivering confidence with every ride with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else as of August of 25. From footwork to breath work, Mazda sweats the details like athletes sweat the details, bringing the same intention to how they craft every model, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. Driving a Mazda is just different in terms of the connection to the road versus other vehicles out there today. And all-wheel drive is standard now in every crossover SUV, so you can drive with confidence through almost every season. Like NFL players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Mike, let's finish on a positive note here. The Cincinnati Bengals defense forced numerous punts in the first half. They, after that strip sack from Trey Hendrickson, got off the field a number of times, keeping the game to 14 offensive points for the Detroit Lions in that first half before Jake Browning threw interceptions early in drives deep in his own territory, and the defense just couldn't hold up, and the wheels started to come off in the second half. But we had a stunt work and get Miles Murphy freed up for a sack in this game. We had Trey Hendrickson productive against bad tackles and pressuring Jared Goff, who only had 23 dropbacks, but was pressured on roughly 30% of them, according to PFF charting. We had some good run defense, especially early from TJ Slayton. We had some really good run plays early from BJ Hill as well. A number of players on this defense. DJ Turner, pass breakup on Amon-Ra St. Brown, creating plays, getting off the field early, giving the offense a chance, which is why we kept saying, like, man, yeah, if they had a quarterback that could do something early in this game, they had opportunities. They were getting the ball back without being in this massive hole early. The first couple of drives aside, what were the things you liked? What were the adjustments you liked from Al Golden's defense this week?
The adjustment of moving back into their 4-down type of personnel groupings, 4 defensive linemen, and then when they went base, they go 3 linebackers. And at times, they still play the same fronts. They would still bring in maybe even bigger bodies and play some of those odd fronts that they wanted to play when they had the 5 defensive linemen in there. But they just moved Oren Burks, Demetrius Knight, Barrett Carter, like one of the linebackers up to the end position instead. And now, yes, it's a tell on who's probably going to drop if they play coverage, but you're dropping a guy who plays coverage in practices. Like the amount of practice that Cam Sample probably does in coverage is probably not much more than the amount of practice that you and I do dropping into zones on our daily routine. So it's not going to be very high. I like that change. Obviously, I like that they did just reduce Trey down against the left side and just like, okay, this is how we're going to get the situation where we get him over Manu, because otherwise, when they just go tight end to that side, they know the Bengals will move Trey over to the right side, and they like that matchup. Penei Sewell did a good job in this game. Excellent job, really, overall. I think third downs were interesting. It's a little inflated because it includes a third down, kneel and a run on like 3rd and 14 late in the game, because the Lions just, fourth quarter, they weren't, at least on offense, they were not, calling up some big beaters and trying to pick up these third downs. But early in the game, that in the first half, I'd say through the first 3 quarters, they were trying to pick up first downs on third down, and the Bengals played it pretty well. I thought that's when they kind of emptied the Rolodex. So they got some stops in those situations. You had an invert cover 2. It seemed like they tried to mess with Jared Goff a bit, where twice they ran an invert cover 2. They ran a bizarre 2 roll where they ran a cat blitz as a corner blitz off of the end, that one got picked up. But then they also, from those same pre-snap looks, looked into just playing 3 buzz, just having the safety stay there and just play a buzz, the hook zone, and the backer played the support in the flat. And they also played this hot coverage, which I haven't seen them run, which is 6-man pressure with zone behind it. So you had 5 zone defenders and 6 guys rushing the passer. This is a ball that gets broken up by Demetrius Knight. They brought everybody, it looked like, but it wasn't 0. They played 3 deep, 2 unders, hot coverage, which is a zone of sorts where they just get guys into windows, common windows that he's going to hit, and trying to play off his eyes, the ball, and the routes in front of them. And that worked really well. And I hadn't seen him do that for the Bengals so far, but I did see Al Golden run that a couple of times as like a funky 3rd down look in college. So finally kind of bringing that out there, and it worked. I wonder if you'll see it again.
I think one of the things that I liked in this game, in a game that the Bengals were behind the entire game, is that they found a pass rush against the Lions in a way that we haven't seen the Lions got like that in the pass rush. They'd gone since Green Bay in week 1, which was a really ugly game for Detroit. And Green Bay looked like a real contender, and everyone's like, they lost their coaches. Maybe Detroit is just washed from the brain drain. Gave up 4 sacks in that game. 3 straight weeks against Chicago, against Baltimore, against Cleveland. Cleveland's pretty impressive to me to give up 0 sacks against Cleveland. And there were pressures in that game, for sure. He was pressured. Jared Goff was on 12 of his 27 dropbacks. Against the Bengals, he was pressured on just 9 of his 27 dropbacks, but got home for 4 sacks, did the Bengals in this game. And we've been complaining about the pass rush all year. It's been a problem. And I don't think it was great or anything in this game, but when you get pressure on 33-ish% of Jared Goff's dropbacks in a play action heavy scheme that slows you down, and Detroit's play action was very effective, I think, in slowing down the pass rush on a couple of plays in this game, with a great pass protecting back in David Montgomery, who was great in pass protection in this game. I think you chalk that up as a win for the Bengals in some capacity. You get pressure home, you get the sacks, and that's a positive as well. I think DJ Turner's play of late has been a positive as well. And so now it's, okay, how do we find those adjustments earlier in the game? How do we get out of these things? Like they come into the game with these ideas, and it feels like they're outsmarting themselves a little bit on some of the scripted drives at times. And some of the stuff where they're dropping ends into coverage, some of the replacement pressures that we've talked about don't seem to be fooling anyone. So it's nice to hear also you're talking about them finding ways to get some deception that is actually causing the quarterback to take that extra beat this week.
Yeah, there was that 1-2 roll was a replacement pressure, but other than that one, we're all good. No replacement pressures really, and they picked up the 1st down on that one. So,
but one is instead of it being your primary pressure package,
right.
It's different.
The thing about simulated pressures and replacement pressures is you also have to send the house once in a while, because otherwise, offense isn't going to respect it. If you line up and you look like you're going to blitz everybody, but you only ever send 4. Why, as an offense, would we move to some max protect or a situation where, you see the Bengals do all the time, move the running back up? Okay, we got to account for absolutely everybody right here. And instead, a lot of teams will just go yeah, you're dropping. You have to send it. You have to send it once in a while. So it was nice to see them finally send it. And the Lions were not ready. They were not ready for that 3 deep, 2 under hot coverage. 2 guys came free, because I think actually Ratledge might have messed up a little bit. BJ Hill right down the middle, and then Demetrius Knight off the edge. Neither one got picked up. And I think it was kind of one of those, you've seen it the whole game too, where they get in these looks, but they're not coming. We've seen it on film. They're not going to come out of these looks. They're going to find a way to send 4. So let's just pick up the 4 they send. Then when they send, everybody's like, oh no, the alarms are going off. We've trained for this, but we weren't really prepared for it in this week.
Yeah. Some tendency beaters, but a lot of what this team's doing, I don't know. I keep skewing negative just because it was such a bad loss, and I think that that is the overall tenor that we need to come away from that game with. Despite there being some signs of encouragement and some good adjustments from the defense, the deception needs to be more consistent. I forget what point I was going to make when I started this tangent, but it was nice to see some progress from a number of players, some guys playing well on the front. Interesting linebacker rotation in this game. Demetrius Knight, 36 snaps, Barrett Carter, 33 snaps. Logan Wilson played the entire game, and Oren Burks played a handful of snaps as well, most of which were on the first couple of drives, 13 snaps for Oren Burks in this game. So some interesting stuff as they shake up linebacker, try to get Barrett Carter on the field a little bit more. And it's coming, I guess, this week at the expense of Demetrius Knight. And we'll see next week as they continue really to try to find the personnel packages that they like best on that side of the ball and continue to rotate guys throughout the game. The other guy that was barely active for the first time this year, McKinley Jackson, 6 snaps for McKinley Jackson, 3 snaps for Josh Newton in this game, 13 snaps for Miles Murphy, just some of the lower snap count numbers that I find interesting on the defensive side of the ball is they're trying to find a way forward, and it doesn't get too much easier. Green Bay, week 6 coming up, and dealing with all those problems. Mike, appreciate the time and insight into this week's Bengals blowout film. Hopefully we don't have to talk about blowouts all season. It'd be nice to talk about a real competitive football game. We'll see what moves the Bengals make or don't make this week. We'll have you covered right here on Locked On Bengals for the rest of the week leading into the trip to Green Bay. Until then, find Mike on Twitter at Bengals_Sands. Find his writing over at BengalsTalk.com. Appreciate you listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening and have a good one.